What happens when one of America's most recognizable morning show hosts decides she's done with sugar-coated interviews and PR-crafted answers? What happens when Savannah Guthrie, known for her sharp intellect behind that warm smile, finally says what millions have been thinking about Meghan Markle all along? The tension in Studio Won't A could be felt through the camera lenses. Crew members exchanged wary glances as Savannah sat across from Meghan, her posture impeccable, her hands folded calmly on the desk. Meghan, on the other hand, was the picture of media perfection. Cream blazer flawlessly tailored, hair styled in soft waves, and that polished smile she had flashed in countless interviews before. "Meghan, thank you for being here this morning," Savannah began, her tone polite but noticeably cooler than usual. "You're here to talk about your new lifestyle brand, but let's be honest, our viewers have a lot of questions that go beyond candles and wellness retreats." Megan's smile faltered just slightly before snapping back into place. "Of course, Savannah. I'm always happy to connect with your audience," she replied, her voice dripping with practiced warmth. Savannah leaned in just a touch, her eyes steady. "You've spoken repeatedly about being silenced, about having no voice. Yet here you are, on your fourth major network interview this month alone. How does someone who claims to be voiceless manage to get more airtime than most elected officials?" The studio fell silent. Camera operators froze, instinctively sensing this was not going to be a puff piece. Megan's posture stiffened. "I think there's a big difference between having a platform and actually being heard, Savannah. When people are constantly twisting your words, you sometimes have to speak louder just to be understood." Savannah's lips curled into the faintest trace of a smirk. "Interesting, because I've gone through your past interviews, and there are, well, some pretty glaring inconsistencies. For instance, a few months ago, you told another network you were completely unprepared for royal life. No one helped you understand the protocols. Yet in your own engagement interview, you mentioned the comprehensive briefings you received beforehand." Megan's jaw tightened. She shifted slightly in her chair, her eyes scanning Savannah's face for any sign of retreat. But there was none. "Well, context matters," Megan replied with that same glossy tone, almost as if reading from a script. "There were briefings, yes, but there wasn't the emotional support I needed during such a difficult time. Those are two very different things." "Are they, though?" Savannah shot back smoothly. "Because you've made serious allegations, claims that have damaged reputations. And yet, when asked for specifics, you rarely provide any. Don't you think the public deserves more than vague implications?" Megan gave a soft, almost theatrical laugh, the kind she often used in interviews to lighten tension. "Savannah, with respect, I find it fascinating that when women of color talk about their experiences, they're asked to prove their pain. Would you ask a male CEO who overcame adversity the same thing?" "Actually, yes, and I have," Savannah replied, her tone cool but unyielding. The air in the studio grew heavier by the second. Viewers at home were glued to their screens, sensing that this was not going to end well for Meghan. Savannah tilted her head slightly as if studying Meghan. "You've built an entire brand around pain, around grievance. Netflix specials, book deals, podcasts, all centered on telling your truth. At what point does sharing your pain become profiting from it?" Meghan's eyes flashed with irritation, though her smile didn't waver. "I think it's incredibly unfair to frame empowerment as exploitation. I'm using my platform to help others. If that makes some people uncomfortable, maybe they need to reflect on why that is." Savannah didn't flinch. "Or maybe," she said quietly, "they just don't like being manipulated." For the first time, Meghan's media-perfect mask cracked ever so slightly. Her eyes narrowed, and her smile dropped for a fraction of a second. The crew knew this interview had just gone completely off script. The pause after Savannah's last remark, "they just don't like being manipulated," was deafening. Meghan blinked once, twice, then inhaled deeply as if preparing to deflect with another round of practiced empathy. Empathy. But the words didn't come so easily this time. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but clipped. "I think it's dangerous, Savannah, to suggest that someone speaking their truth is inherently manipulative, especially when that person has endured trauma." Savannah didn't blink. "But the thing is, Meghan, you're not just sharing a story, you're selling it." The tension snapped. Meghan's practiced smile gave way to something sharper, an almost imperceptible eye roll, quickly masked by a flash of indignation. Wow, she said under her breath, then louder. Is that really what this is about? Do we shame every person who turns adversity into purpose, into a platform for good? Savannah leaned back, her expression neutral but unreadable. No, but we ask questions when those platforms are built on claims that continue to shift depending on the interviewer. That's not shame, that's accountability. Meghan's tone grew more clipped. This is starting to sound a lot like a tabloid headline, Savannah. I came here to talk about empowering women. Right, your lifestyle brand, Savannah cut in, her tone tightening, which launched the same week your new podcast episode dropped, again centered around the monarchy, and just days before the press release for your upcoming book, all of which revolve around the same narrative that you were silenced, ignored, cast out. But you're everywhere. So tell me again, who's silencing you? Meghan shifted in her chair, visibly bristling now. Being visible doesn't mean being heard. It doesn't mean being understood. It certainly doesn't mean being safe. Savannah raised an eyebrow. Safe? You're in a multi-million-dollar mansion in Montecito. You have a global platform. You've got deals with Netflix, Spotify, Penguin Random House. How are you not safe? Meghan opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her usual rhythm, the elegant pivot, the breathy self-reflection, was cracking. She forced a small laugh, but it came out hollow. I think it's telling, she finally said, that when a woman sets boundaries, she's called difficult. When she shares her pain, she's called manipulative. When she speaks too much, she's dismissed. When she stays silent, she's accused of hiding something. That's not what I'm doing, Savannah said firmly. What I'm doing is asking you to reconcile contradictions in your story. That's not dismissal, that's journalism. The studio's stillness had shifted now from quiet anticipation to electrified discomfort. The crew kept their eyes fixed on their monitors, but they were listening to every word. You want contradictions? Meghan snapped, her tone suddenly sharp. How about the fact that this interview was supposed to be about women lifting each other up, and instead you're tearing one down in front of millions? Savannah's calm didn't falter. I'm not tearing you down. I'm asking if your empowerment brand is built on a foundation of grievance, because that matters. If you've positioned yourself as a voice for the voiceless, then transparency isn't optional. It's essential. Meghan looked away for a beat, her jaw tight, her hands clasped in her lap, knuckles white. Then she faced Savannah again, her voice laced with accusation. You know what, Savannah? Maybe you should try walking a mile in my shoes before you sit there in judgment. And Savannah delivered the line that would dominate headlines for days. Maybe I would, if the shoes weren't designer and the path wasn't paved with multi-million-dollar deals. The silence that followed was not just awkward, it was seismic. Meghan's mouth parted slightly, but no words came. The crew, the audience at home, everyone knew it. For the first time in a long time, Meghan Markle was not in control of the narrative, and Savannah Guthrie had just drawn blood. Meghan's smile had all but vanished now. Her eyes narrowed, her posture stiff, but she wasn't about to back down. You know, Savannah, she said, her voice low but simmering, this is exactly why people hesitate to be vulnerable in the public eye. Because the second they open up, they get torn apart by journalists looking for their gotcha moment. Savannah leaned forward just slightly, her hands still folded neatly on the desk. This isn't about vulnerability, Meghan. It's about accountability. You've made very public accusations that have affected real people's reputations. When you profit from those accusations, it's only fair that someone asks you for evidence. That's not fair, Meghan shot back, her tone growing sharper. I don't see you asking male politicians or CEOs for this kind of relentless proof when they share their hardships. Savannah didn't miss a beat. Actually, I do. But we're not talking about politicians or CEOs. We're talking about you. You've positioned yourself as a truth teller while simultaneously refusing to substantiate your most serious claims. That's not empowerment. That's performance. The word performance seemed to hit Meghan like a slap. Excuse me? She said, her tone suddenly icy. Savannah's eyes didn't waver. You've built a brand on victimhood, And every interview, every project, every headline reinforces that narrative. It's not healing, it's monetizing pain. There's a difference. For the first time, Meghan's polished facade cracked visibly. Her lips tightened. Her jaw moved slightly, as if she was grinding her teeth. "You're gaslighting me," she said finally, throwing out the word like a grenade. But Savannah didn't flinch. Gaslighting is denying someone's reality. "I'm not denying that you face challenges. I'm asking you to be specific about the claims you've made while earning millions from telling your story. That's called journalism." Meghan let out a short, bitter laugh. "You mean ambush journalism? This is nothing but a character assassination dressed up as an interview. I thought we were here to talk about my work, about empowering women, building something positive." "You can't build empowerment on half-truths," Savannah said calmly, her voice steady but firm. "You've created a narrative where any criticism of your story becomes an attack on your identity. That's not bravery, Meghan. That's control." The camera zoomed in as Meghan shifted in her seat, visibly rattled. She glanced off to the side as if looking for support, but the crew stayed glued to their jobs, silent and impartial. Savannah struck again, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. "You talk a lot about using your platform to give others a voice. But what about the people who've signed NDAs? The staff members who can't defend themselves? The family members you've publicly accused but who can't speak out? Where's their voice?" Meghan blinked rapidly, her hands twisting slightly in her lap. "That's not how power works," she said finally, her tone defensive. "When you're the one with less power, you don't owe your oppressors a platform." Savannah leaned in, her eyes sharp. "But you're not powerless anymore, are you? You're one of the most famous women in the world. You have Netflix, book deals, millions in the bank. At what point does playing the powerless victim become a choice?" The room went dead silent. Meghan opened her mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. For the first time, viewers could see it. The flicker of doubt in her eyes. The unmistakable recognition that Savannah was saying what millions had been thinking all along. Meghan Markle wasn't winning this interview. Meghan's breathing had quickened ever so slightly, a small but telling sign that her usual calm was slipping away. Her eyes darted to the cameras, then back to Savannah, as if silently pleading for a lifeline that wasn't coming. "You know what, Savannah?" she said finally, her voice tight. "I came here expecting a respectful conversation. Instead, I'm being ambushed with tabloid talking points. It's insulting, and frankly, it's beneath you." Savannah didn't flinch. "What's beneath me is ignoring contradictions just because the person sitting across from me is famous. You've made millions telling your story, Meghan, but telling your story doesn't make you immune to scrutiny." Meghan leaned back slightly, arms folding across her chest, her polished PR posture crumbling. "You think this is scrutiny? This is an attack. This is why people in the public eye stop sharing their experiences. Because no matter what we say, it's never enough." "This isn't about never enough," Savannah replied smoothly. "It's about the fact that you've built an empire and painting yourself as the voiceless underdog while never acknowledging your own power. You can't have it both ways, celebrity without accountability, profit without responsibility." Meghan's mouth opened, then closed again. Her fingers tapped against her arm nervously before she finally snapped, her voice rising slightly. "Do you know how exhausting it is to be judged for every single word, every single action, while people twist your intentions?" "Yes, actually, Piali," Savannah said sharply, "because I've been in this business long enough to know what real accountability looks like. And this, what you're doing, it's not accountability. It's a curated narrative designed to make you untouchable." The words hit like a blow. Meghan's eyes flashed, a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Untouchable?" she repeated, her voice almost incredulous. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have your mental health struggles used against you? To be branded as difficult, as ungrateful, just for wanting to live authentically?" Savannah didn't blink. "Millions of people struggle with mental health, Meghan. Most of them don't get multi-million-dollar Netflix deals out of it. They don't get to write bestsellers about their pain while refusing to answer basic questions about their claims." Meghan let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. So now I'm not even allowed to heal publicly? I'm not allowed to use my platform to help others? Of course you are, Savannah said firmly. But healing publicly and profiting from grievance while dodging accountability are two different things. You've blurred that line, and you've convinced yourself that any criticism is an attack. That's not empowerment, Meghan. That's manipulation. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Meghan's carefully curated composure cracked completely now. Her voice wavered, her lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time she looked less like a poised duchess and more like someone cornered with nowhere to go. "You're unbelievable," she said, her tone almost shaking. "This is exactly the toxic behavior that destroyed my life. And you're part of it." Savannah's voice remained steady, unwavering. "What I'm part of is journalism. What you're doing is theater." The camera zoomed in. Meghan's face had flushed red, her jaw tense. For a split second, she looked as though she might rip off her mic and walk out. And then Savannah, with the calm precision of someone who knew she just won, leaned forward and delivered the line that sealed the moment. "If you walk out right now, Meghan, you prove every single critic right. That you can dish it out, but you can't take it. That you demand accountability from others, but refuse it for yourself." Meghan froze. The studio held its breath. The mask was gone. For the first time in years, the world was seeing Meghan Markle, not the brand, not the polished Duchess persona, but the real rattled person behind it all. The silence in Studio 1A stretched on endlessly, heavy enough to suffocate. Meghan stood frozen for a beat, then sank back into her chair, her movements sharp and mechanical. Her mic cable tugged slightly as she sat, the only sound in the room besides the faint hum of studio lights. "Fine," Meghan said finally, her voice low, taut with anger she could barely conceal. "Go ahead, Savannah. Ask your final gotcha question. Make your moment." Savannah tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but unrelenting. "This isn't about a gotcha moment, Meghan. It's about honesty. So here's my question. Why do you think you're entitled to sympathy without scrutiny?" Meghan blinked, stunned by the directness. "Entitled? I've shared my truth, my pain, my struggles, because they're real." Savannah's voice remained steady, but there was a steel edge to it now. "No one's saying your struggles weren't real, but you've monetized them. Netflix deals, book contracts, speaking tours, and all while refusing to provide the details that would make your allegations credible. You've built an empire out of grievance, Meghan. That's not bravery. That's branding." Meghan's lips parted slightly, but no words came. She swallowed hard, her face a mix of disbelief and fury. "You think this is about branding? Do you have any idea what it's like to live under that microscope, to have every decision criticized?" "I don't," Savannah admitted, leaning forward just slightly. "But I do know what accountability looks like. And this, what you've done, this isn't accountability, it's performance. You've confused stubbornness with integrity, grievance with justice, and victimhood with virtue." The words landed like a punch. Meghan's eyes darted toward the cameras, then back to Savannah, as if searching for some kind of lifeline. But there was none. "You've spent years telling the world how badly you were treated," Savannah continued, her tone softening just slightly, though her gaze never wavered. "But you've never once acknowledged your own role in the chaos. You had a chance to rise above it, to show grace under pressure, to make your critics irrelevant. Instead, Ed, you became exactly what they said you were." Meghan's face went pale. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap, and for a fleeting moment, she looked less like the composed Duchess and more like someone who had finally run out of excuses. "I think we're done here," she said quietly, removing her microphone with shaking hands. Savannah didn't stop her. She simply leaned back in her chair, eyes following Meghan as she stood, rigid with anger, and turned to leave. But just as Meghan reached the edge of the set, Savannah's voice cut through the silence one last time. "The tragedy isn't that you were treated unfairly, Meghan. The tragedy is that you had every chance to be better, and you chose not to." Meghan froze mid-step, her back still to the cameras. Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn around. And then, slowly, she walked away. The cameras lingered on Savannah, composed and resolute, as the broadcast faded to black. Social media would explode within minutes. Headlines would call it the interview that stripped Meghan Markle bare. But in that studio, in that final silence, everyone knew exactly what had happened. Savannah Guthrie had done what no one else dared. She had cut through the spin, she had exposed the performance. And for the first time in years, Meghan Markle had no place to hide.